By 16. Tiu de Q storytelling. My wife took all our savings and left the day I got my cancer diagnosis, but what she didn't know was I'd been preparing for this. Fan 1. Tin Nyan Va Quang Trong. I can still hear the clinic door click shut behind me. A dry, heavy sound, like the world itself had just slammed closed in front of me. I gripped my file bag and walked slowly out to the parking lot. My eyes fixed on the sheet of paper that read, Lymphoma, Stage 2. That day the sky was gray and dull. No rain, but not a hint of sunshine, either. A light breeze brushed my skin like a cold hand tracing the back of my neck. I slid into the driver's seat, leaned back, and let out a long, shuddering breath. The smell of vinyl from the dashboard mixed with the faint scent of disinfectant from the exam room, trapping me inside my own chest. I picked up my phone and dialed my wife. Lena, I'm done. Can you come home? We need to talk. Her voice came through on speaker. A little distracted. I'm getting my nails done with Marcy. I'll be late, okay? I was silent for a few seconds, my thumb tapping lightly on the steering wheel. Okay, try to get home early. I'll be waiting. I didn't tell her I had cancer. Not by phone. Not while she was picking out nail polish. I drove home. When I opened the front door, the familiar squeak of the hinge echoed through the empty house, and it felt wrong. Too quiet, like the place had lost its warmth. I stepped into the bedroom. Half of her side of the closet was gone. Her pink suitcase, nowhere to be seen. On the vanity, our wedding photo frame was missing, leaving a perfect rectangle of dust on the wood. My phone buzzed. A text from Lena. Image. Screenshot of our joint savings account. Balance. $0. I didn't sign up for this. I didn't react right away. I just sank onto the edge of the bed, laid the phone on my thigh, and stared at the lifeless numbers as if they might explain themselves. I typed 2 words back, stay healthy. Then I got up and headed for the kitchen. I grabbed a cold beer, popped the cap, it rang sharp and clear, and carried it out to the back porch. I sat in the wooden chair I'd refinished last summer, leaned my head back, and watched the sky turn a bruised gray. No tears, no shouting, no breaking anything, just the feeling that a piece of me had been pulled out, like blood sucked from my heart. I don't know how long I sat there. The sun must have set at some point, didn't even notice, until the air turned colder and the beer in my hand went lukewarm. The smell of fresh cut grass from Bill's yard drifted over, real and alive, reminding me the world was still spinning, just not with me included. Then I heard the old wooden gate creak, a familiar sound that now sounded so lonely, and I knew Bill was there. I didn't rush to open the door. I stood, slipped on a thin wool jacket, and walked down the hall. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor, loneliness without emphasis. I opened the door. He stood there holding a brown paper bag that smelled of bread and stew. Wind tousling his hair under the porch light's soft glow. Jack, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I saw Lena drive off this afternoon. She looked in a hurry. I glanced at the floor. My chest tightened, no real pain. Just tension. Yeah, I croaked. I've got bad news. About my health. She couldn't handle it. Bill didn't pry. That's what I appreciated about him. He just held out the bag. Sandra made extra beef stew. Eat it while it's hot, helps you sleep. I took the bag, my hand touching the warm paper. That small warmth made my eyes sting. Thank you, really. He nodded and turned away, his steps slow as he disappeared behind the fence. I stood a moment longer, then gently closed the door. The hinge clicked shut, harsh. Final. The house went completely still again, save for the ticking clock in the living room. I set the food on the dining table but didn't open it. I wasn't hungry, not sure I'd ever be hungry again. I turned on the kitchen light. The warm yellow glow only made the room feel emptier. 2 glasses still sat on the shelf, one with half-finished wine from Lena last night. The red lipstick stain still on the rim. I sat down and stared at that glass, as if I could talk to it, to her, to our past. Then I stood and walked down the hall to the little home office. I opened the bottom drawer. Inside was the dark blue file folder Peter had given me a month ago. Never let anyone cross your boundaries, Jack, he'd said, not even the one you love most. Always keep something for yourself. I took out the copy of my will. The deeds to my Wyoming land from my grandfather. The title for the '69 Mustang I was restoring, car I'd planned to give Lena on our 5th anniversary. Her name was listed as co-owner in my neat blue ink. I stared at her name for a long time. It was like looking at someone familiar in a mirror, then realizing they're not who you thought. I quietly set the papers back in the drawer and flipped on the desk lamp. Its soft light spread across the desk, illuminating every crease and curve on the documents. A single thought hit me clear. I was ready to protect her, but she was ready to leave me. With the lamp still glowing, I sat in silence, my mind drifting backward. I first met Lena on a summer day in 2017. I was tinkering with an old pickup at a friend's outdoor wedding. She wore an olive green dress, her hair curled just so, holding a glass of red wine, but her eyes were on the grease-stained rag in my hands. She made the first move, teasing that a man whose hands stay clean probably isn't worth trusting. I laughed. For the first time, I saw someone beautiful who didn't mind the dirt under my nails. And then everything felt like a dream. 6 months later, we moved in together. A year later, we were married. I remember the first time Lena and I went house hunting. The very first place was nothing but dust and dampness. But Lena spun around in the living room, arms outstretched, and said, "I see potential here." I saw something else. I saw that I could live anywhere, as long as it was with her. We repainted every wall. I rewired the lights, fixed the plumbing. Lena picked out the curtains, throw pillows, and warm lighting. She posted before and after shots online, calling us the undefeated Reno team. Some nights when I came home late, still smelling of grease, she'd have a glass of red wine waiting on the kitchen counter. "No matter how tired I am, I feel safe when you're home," she'd say. I believed every word, but slowly, the cracks started to appear. Not huge cracks, nothing obvious, just tiny things that hadn't been there before. One evening at dinner, Lena asked, "Have you ever thought about doing something other than fixing cars? Like, something bigger?" I looked up and scooped another piece of chicken onto her plate. "I love what I do. Every car has its own story. I've never wanted anything else." She nodded, but her eyes looked somewhere far ahead, like she'd moved forward and I was still standing still. Another time, she talked about a college friend who'd just gotten promoted and was building a vacation home in Colorado. "He's a lawyer," Lena said, "and his wife doesn't have to work anymore. They're about to buy their second house." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled. We already have a house, and we built it ourselves. Still, after that, I noticed the small distances. Lena coming home later, messages from names I didn't recognize. She laughed more when I wasn't around. She barely touched my shoulder when she sat next to me. Sometimes I'd catch her in front of the mirror, applying her makeup more carefully than usual, but never asking, "How'd I look?" like she always used to. Then one day, while cleaning our bedroom, I found a business card in her wallet, the Crestwood Luxury Apartments, downtown Seattle. I said nothing. I folded it and slid it back where it belonged. That evening, I cooked dinner, set the table like always. She came home late and said her meeting ran long. We ate in silence. I watched her pick up her fork, her nails painted wine red, a color I'd never seen her wear before. I wanted to ask, "Are you hiding something from me?" But I was too afraid. Afraid of her answer. Because deep down, I already knew. There's something strange about the days before a storm breaks. Not the wind, not the rain, but the silence. A kind of quiet that makes your skin prickle. Everything seems calm, but you just know something is cracking, even if no one's brave enough to name it. I got the official news on a Thursday afternoon. I'd been suspicious, mild fevers, unexplained lumps, losing weight despite eating normally. But when the doctor looked at me with that hesitant gaze and said softly, "Stage 2 lymphoma, but it's still manageable," everything around me went silent. The chair I sat in felt like it sank deeper. The fluorescent ceiling light dimmed. I heard the clock ticking, as if time itself had stretched out. I didn't call Lena right away. I drove aimlessly around town, like I was looking for a reason to delay the truth. Finally, I stopped in front of our house. Sat there for 10 minutes with my hand on the wheel. The windows up, but I could still hear the wind through the pine trees in the backyard. I walked inside just as dusk settled. I flipped the light switch. The warm bulb flickered once, then glared too brightly, making everything look cold. I made dinner, her favorite, chicken and mushroom cream pasta. I chopped onions until my eyes stung. Maybe from the onions, maybe from everything else. Lena walked in while I was rinsing my hands. She knocked lightly on the island, like she didn't want to disturb me, even though it felt unfamiliar. "You're home," she said. No hug, no cheek kiss like usual. I saw her face reflected in the fridge door. Perfect makeup, eyes bright, wine-red lips. We sat at the table. I poured her wine and a glass of water for myself. I wasn't hungry, but I took bites anyway, trying to make it feel normal. Trying not to shake. She talked about her coworker's promotion in a steady tone, never once asking, "Are you okay?" I watched her hand with the fork and that wedding band glinting silver, looking like a stranger's ring. Then, in the middle of her story, I put down my fork and looked up. "Have you ever thought, if one day I got seriously sick, what you'd do?" She paused and furrowed her brow. "Why are you asking that now?" I smiled, a small, sad smile. "Nothing. I'm just tired, feeling under the weather lately." "Yeah," she said, "you have been different." That was it. Then she looked down and kept eating, as if what I'd said was no big deal. As if someone getting weaker was nothing more than a small inconvenience. After dinner, she carried her wine glass to the sink. I was behind her, about to reach out, but I froze. She took off her light jacket and hung it up. A small white slip of paper poked out of her pocket. Quietly, she disappeared upstairs. When she was gone, I moved forward and pulled the paper free. A receipt for a holding deposit on that Seattle apartment, $1 down. Date: 2 weeks ago. I stood there for a long time. The kitchen light still glowed. Her half-finished wine glass sat by the sink. The red still deep. The surface rippled faintly, as if someone had just touched it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the garage beside the Mustang I'd been restoring. My hand traced the cold curves of its body. Metal, honest and unyielding. It didn't betray. I thought of what the doctor had said. There's a chance for recovery, but it will take perseverance and a strong spirit. I'd always believed I had Lena to lean on, but now I understood. Some pains are colder than chemotherapy, and she was one of them. 3 days after that dinner, I began treatment. The oncology ward wasn't crowded, but everything moved in slow motion. A nurse led me to a pale gray leather recliner. I sat, feeling the chill of the vinyl at my back. "Ready to start, Jack?" she said, gently inserting the IV. It felt like liquid metal flowing into my veins. "Is your wife waiting out there?" she asked softly. I shook my head, forcing calm into my voice. "She's on a business trip. I came alone." The nurse didn't pry. She just placed her hand lightly on my shoulder. "The first session is usually the hardest, but you'll make it through." I nodded and closed my eyes. I didn't sleep. I only fought to keep the tears behind my lids. That afternoon when I got home, a cloth-draped ceramic tray waited on the porch. Bill's spicy stew, the one he'd mentioned. I lifted it with both hands. It was surprisingly heavy. A note taped on top read, "We made extra. Eat it while it's hot." Bill and Sandra. I knew they were lying. They cooked because they cared. I carried the tray into the kitchen and set it on the table. The aroma filled the empty room. But when I scooped a spoonful into my bowl and looked at it, I couldn't swallow. My throat tightened. I held the spoon, trembling. Finally, I went to the bathroom and sat on the cold tile. Sweat soaked me like a fever. I didn't know if it was the drugs, the stress, or my heart fracturing. That night, for the first time in years, I called my sister Ellie in Portland. "I have cancer," I said, my voice hoarse. Lena left me. Silence on the other end, then quiet sobbing. "I'll drive up right away." "I'll stay with you." "Not yet. I need to sort things out first." Did she take the money? Her question stopped me cold. I'd never considered it. First thing the next morning, I called the bank. After a few minutes of verification, the teller said, "We see the entire balance, $39.412, was withdrawn from your joint account 40 minutes after your call on the 15th of last month." I laid the phone down. My entire body froze. She'd pulled the money right after I'd called, before she even knew the severity of my illness. before she knew anything about my chances. To Lena, the moment she heard health problem, she chose to walk away. No explanation, no final look. Something in me hardened then. Not anger, not tears, purpose. That afternoon, I drove to Uncle Peter's. On the passenger seat lay every financial document, asset deed, and my diagnosis paperwork. I walked in with a calm I scarcely recognized. He looked up and set aside his glasses. "What do you need, Jack?" "We need to remove her name from the Mustang title, stop the Wyoming land transfer, and prepare for division of assets in case she files." He didn't ask what had happened. He just nodded. "So it begins." I sat beside him for 3 hours, going line by line through every account and transaction history. I even showed him the screenshot of her message. "I didn't sign up for this." And as the kitchen light dimmed behind me, I realized, the only thing more brutal than losing your health is losing the one you thought would never leave. My uncle stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he said, "This is proof. Not just cruelty, it might be illegal." I didn't feel triumphant, didn't feel relief. Just cold, bone-deep cold, as if, for the first time, I truly understood. When you're in the hospital, not everyone will sit by your bedside. And sometimes, the one who walks away is the person who once said, "You're my whole world." In the second week after chemo, a thick yellow envelope slipped through my door. I opened it. The paper still smelled fresh, ink barely dry. There was something merciless about the first line. Divorce petition, irreconcilable differences. Signed, Lena Marshall. Request. Remove her name from the mortgage, but still claim 50% of all assets, including the house and the Mustang. No mention of the $39.412 she already took. I held the stack of papers without trembling, not because I felt strong, but because I'd known this was coming. And for the first time, I felt ready. I set the documents on the kitchen table, opened the bottom drawer and took out a heavy glass. I filled it with cold water. As the overhead light reflected off the surface, I realized how calm I was. Suspiciously calm. That afternoon I drove over to Uncle Peter's. Light rain blurred the windshield, making it feel like I was driving through my own memories. When he'd read the petition, he placed it on the wooden table, removed his glasses, and leaned back. "She really wants more, after taking everything?" I nodded. "She thinks I'm too weak to fight back." "She's half right. You're not strong, but you have proof." I laid out each piece. The screenshot of her, "I didn't sign up for this," message. Bank statements, withdrawal dates, my cancer diagnosis, my treatment journal. Uncle Peter was silent for a long beat. Then he called an old friend, Catherine Chen, a divorce attorney known for handling complex, ruthless cases with ruthless intelligence. "I think you need her expertise," he told me, "and I think she's not ready for what's coming." 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Jack, it's me, Lena. This is my new number. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half the house." I didn't reply. 3 days later, another message. "Jack, I know you're going through a lot, but silence won't solve anything. I have rights, too. I'm not a bad person." Not a bad person. I stared at those words. For a moment I wanted to laugh, but my lips stayed tight. I blocked the number. The third round of chemo left me vomiting for 2 days straight. I kept nothing down, lost nearly 13 pounds. The cold crept through me, from bone to skin. Ellie, my sister, drove up from Portland and stayed a week. She cleaned the house, prepped meals in labeled containers for each day. One evening, I collapsed on the couch after treatment. Ellie set another envelope on the coffee table. It was from Lena's lawyer again. More demands, more threats, all dressed in polite language but with a clear goal. Take more. Ellie's face flushed. "How long are you going to stay silent? She gutted you, left you for sick, and now she wants half the house you're lying in with chemotherapy tubes?" I sat up and looked into my sister's eyes. "No, not anymore." It's time I spoke up. A few days later, the bank sent an urgent notice to my house. Lena had tried to remove my name from our joint credit card. She even went to the local branch to open the old safe, where I kept the Mustang title, the Wyoming deed, and my grandfather's will. They refused her. She didn't have the second key. The only spare, was in the pocket of my jacket. I called Uncle Peter. She's thrashing like a trapped animal, he said, because she knows there are still things she hasn't gotten. What do we do now? Set a trap, he replied without hesitation. When a thief starts panicking, that's when you bait them with their own greed. I sat at my desk, the same yellowish lamp casting the sad cozy glow Lena used to love. On my computer screen was my bank account balance, 0. Next to it, an old photo. Lena and me in Oregon on our second anniversary. Drenched by a rogue wave and laughing. I lifted the frame. There's a tiny crack across my cheek in the glass. I traced it with my fingertip. That cold bite of the glass felt just like the day I realized I'd been betrayed. Quiet. But it burned straight to the heart. I called Catherine Chen. What can we do? I asked, my voice hoarse from a night of nausea and headaches. Bait the trap, she said flatly. Turn the tables. But we don't push. We let her fall into her own greed. That afternoon, I phoned the broker handling the Wyoming land. Pause everything, I told him, but don't hang up. Call me back tomorrow pretending it's to confirm the sale. Tell me you need cash fast for medical bills. I also contacted my old 401k investment firm. I inquired about early withdrawal, emphasizing, due to cancer treatment, I need to cash out everything. Then I left it all alone. And waited. 2 days later, another letter arrived from Lena's lawyer. This time, they demanded rights to the sale proceeds from the inheritance land and my personal retirement fund. My uncle stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he said, this is evidence, not just cruelty. This could be illegal. I wasn't happy. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt cold, bone deep cold, as if, for the first time, I truly understood. When you're in the hospital, not everyone will sit by your bedside. And sometimes, the one who walks away is the person who once said, you're my whole world. In the second week after chemo, a thick manila envelope slid through my door. I opened it. The ink still smelled fresh. There was something merciless in the first line. Divorce petition, irreconcilable differences. Signed, Lena Marshall. Request. Remove her name from the mortgage, yet claim 50% of all assets. Including the house and the Mustang, no mention of the $39.412 she'd already taken. I held the stack of papers without shaking. Not because I was strong, because I'd known this was coming. And for the first time, I felt ready. I set the papers on the kitchen table, opened the bottom drawer, and grabbed a heavy glass. I filled it with cold water. As the overhead light caught the surface, I realized how calm I was. Suspiciously calm. That afternoon, I drove to Uncle Peter's. Light raindrops blurred the windshield, like I was driving through my own memories. When he'd read the petition, he placed it on the wooden table, removed his glasses, and leaned back. She really wants more, after taking everything? I nodded. She thinks I'm too weak to fight back. She's half right. You may be physically weak, but you have proof. I laid out each piece. The screenshot of her, I didn't sign up for this, message. Bank statements, withdrawal dates, my diagnosis, my treatment journal. Uncle Peter was silent a long beat. Then he called an old friend, Catherine Chen, a divorce attorney famed for handling brutal, complex cases with ruthless efficiency. I think you need her, he said, and I think she's not prepared for what's coming. 2 days later, I got a text from an unknown number. Jack, it's me, Lena. This is my new number. I know you're hurt, but we need to talk. My lawyer says I'm entitled to half the house. I didn't reply. 3 days later, another message. Jack, I know you're going through a lot, but silence won't solve this. I have rights, too. I'm not a bad person. Not a bad person. I stared at those words. For a moment, I wanted to laugh. Instead, I pinched my lips tight and blocked her number. The third round of chemo left me vomiting for 2 days straight. I couldn't keep anything down and lost nearly 13 pounds. The cold bit through my bones. Ellie, my sister, drove up from Portland and stayed a week. She cleaned the house, prepped meals in labeled containers for each day. One evening, after I collapsed on the couch post-treatment, Ellie set another envelope on the coffee table. It was from Lena's lawyer again, more demands, more threats, all in polite language but with one clear goal: dig deeper. Ellie's cheeks flushed red. How long will you stay silent? She left you sick and with mounting bills, and now she wants half your house while you're lying here hooked up to chemo. I sat up and met her eyes. Not anymore. It's time I spoke up. A few days later, the bank sent an urgent notice to my house. Lena had tried to remove my name from our joint credit card and even went to the branch to open the old safe, where I kept the Mustang title, the Wyoming deed, and my grandfather's will. They refused her. She didn't have the second key. The only spare was in my jacket pocket. I called Uncle Peter. She's thrashing like a trapped animal, he said, because she knows there are still things she hasn't taken. What do we do now? Set a trap, he replied. When a thief panics, that's when you bait them with their own greed. I sat at my desk under the same sad cozy lamp Lena used to call warmly sad. On my screen was my bank account balance, 0. Next to it, an old photo. Lena and me in Oregon on our second anniversary. Drenched by a rogue wave and laughing. I lifted the frame. A tiny crack ran across my cheek in the glass. I traced it with my fingertip. That silent bite of cold glass felt just like the day I realized I'd been betrayed, quiet. But it cut straight to the heart. I called Catherine Chen. What can we do? I asked, my voice hoarse from a night of nausea and headaches. We bait the trap, she said flatly. Flip the power. But we don't push. We let her fall into her own greed. That afternoon, I phoned the land broker handling the Wyoming property. Pause everything, I told him, but don't hang up. Call me tomorrow with a confirmation about needing cash for medical bills. I also contacted my old 401k custodian and inquired about an early withdrawal, emphasizing, due to cancer treatment, I need to cash out everything. Then I let it sit. 2 days later, another letter arrived from Lena's lawyer. This time, they demanded a share of both the land sale proceeds and my personal retirement fund. Catherine picked up my files without a word, but her eyes said it all. She's fallen for the trap. That same afternoon, we held a closed-door meeting, me, Catherine, and Uncle Peter. On the table lay every document, texts, withdrawal records, emails, and testimony from Lena's cousin confirming Lena knew about my cancer before she emptied the account. Catherine looked at me and said slowly, Jack, this is premeditated medical abandonment and asset concealment in an emergency. She's no longer at the bargaining table, she's begging. I looked down at my hands, thin, nails tinged gray from chemo. But for the first time in weeks, they weren't shaking. A few days later, as I was leaving the hospital, I spotted a silver BMW parked across the entrance. The driver looked at me through the window. It was Lena's father. I walked right over and tapped on the glass. He rolled down the window. His face unreadable. Jack, he said, sounding like he was making an announcement at a board meeting. You look tired. I offered a small smile. Cancer will do that. He met my eyes. Lena says you're being unreasonable. She's willing to settle, split everything evenly. No lawsuits. I squinted at him. After she withdrew all the money? Left me with chemo bills? He exhaled, as though my words were inconvenient. She panicked. No one teaches you how to face a loved one's cancer. She made a mistake. I looked back at him. But there was no anger left, just a deep sadness at realizing I'd once been part of that family. You call that a mistake. I call it a choice. I turned and started back to my car. But before I climbed in, I paused and looked over my shoulder. Tell her I'm willing to split things, only if she returns everything first. Otherwise, the court will. The following Monday, Catherine and I met with Lena's side in person. Lena arrived with her father and her lawyer. I barely recognized her, sun-kissed skin, freshly manicured nails, a sharp new haircut. She looked like she'd just returned from vacation, not abandoned her husband during chemo. She couldn't meet my eyes. Catherine opened without preamble. My client was abandoned the moment he disclosed his illness. His joint account was emptied. He was forced to negotiate asset division while he was vomiting from chemo. We have texts, withdrawal histories, witness testimony, bank emails, photos of assets she secretly transferred to a third party, namely her own father. If you want to negotiate, sit down. If you want to gamble with the law, go ahead. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Lena fidgeted, her grip tightening on her purse. Finally, their attorney spoke. She will return everything. But please, let's not make a scene. I sat still. No smile. No pounding the table. No raised voice. I just looked at Lena. She let a single tear roll down, but made no sound. Some screams never leave your throat. Some tears aren't born of regret, but of being caught. I stood and said, "Thank you. I need nothing more." When I got home that evening, dusk was settling. I poured a glass of water and sat on the porch. For the first time, the breeze felt truly cool. The ache in my chest remained. But now I knew, this wasn't the pain of being abandoned. It was the pain of having loved genuinely, while someone else kept score. I didn't lose. I only gave my love to the wrong person. And now, I'm learning how to reclaim it, starting with myself. 30 days after the settlement meeting, a courier dropped a fast-track envelope at my door. Inside was a check for $38. The money Lena had taken, along with a signed legal agreement. She waived all future claims on the house, the Mustang, the Wyoming land, and promised not to contest any of my assets in the future. I took the check to the hospital and paid off most of my treatment costs. Julia, the nurse who'd been with me through every chemo session, greeted me at the front desk. "You look like you're doing better," she said, smiling genuinely. I nodded. My latest tests came back good. She glanced at the check amount. "Insurance covered it?" I looked at her. "No, it was a restoration of honor." A week later, I signed the divorce papers at Catherine's office. My hand trembled as I signed, but not from regret. Because once, I truly believed I'd grow old with her. Now, I'm ready to grow old with someone who stays. I walked out of Catherine's office holding the final decree. No joy, no sorrow, just the sense of closing a book I'd read too many times, and finally knowing every line by heart. Uncle Peter waited in the parking lot. He rested a gentle hand on my shoulder, as if afraid to touch an open wound. "What will you do now?" I inhaled deeply. Spring air, cold and clean. Move forward. Start living again. The next month, the Wyoming land sold for $65. I used it to buy a small log cabin in the mountains outside Missoula, Montana. 2 bedrooms, a garage big enough for all my tools, and windows facing the peaks. I sold our old house. On moving day, Bill and Sandra, my quiet neighbors, stood at the gate. Sandra hugged me, then pressed a thermos into my hand. "Some familiar stew, for the nights you feel lonely again." I hugged them, and for the first time in my life, I cried in front of my neighbors. Not from sadness, but from knowing there are people who never say, "I love you," yet show up when you fall. Life in Montana was quieter than I imagined. I fixed up the cabin, bought some new tools. Every morning I brewed coffee and sat on the wooden steps, watching sunlight hit the mountain ridges. Every afternoon I worked in the garage, polishing every curve on the Mustang, now all mine. I stopped fixing cars for clients. Now I fixed my own. Every scratch, every part, every engine roar. It was me repairing my heart with metal and paint. Then one September day, when the leaves first turned gold, I got a text from an unknown number. I knew who it was. The message was short and clear. "I heard you're recovering. I'm glad. I know you don't believe me, but I think of you often. I was scared. I'm sorry, Jack." I read it over and over. No tears, no anger, only one thing I wanted to say, not to her, but to myself. I typed 4 words. "I survived." Then 3 more. "Be well." I hit send, and blocked that number for the last time. That night, I carried a chair into the yard and poured a glass of red wine, just the kind Lena used to like. Not to remember her, but to bring that chapter to a full close. I looked up at the sky. The moon was full and bright, just like the night I came home to an empty wardrobe. But this time, it didn't feel empty. I felt a place for me, in my heart, in my future. I stood, walked into the garage, and flipped on the light. The Mustang gleamed under the bulbs. I won't sell it. I'll rebuild it, from the ground up. Not to give to anyone. Not to prove anything. Just to remind myself that some things break, and with patience, can be reborn stronger than ever. I am one of those things. Some stories don't need a grand finale. They just need someone sitting quietly in the night, telling how they were abandoned, how they stared death in the face, not in a hospital, but in their own faith. Jack didn't seek revenge. He didn't shout or shame or expose anyone. He simply chose to live on. To live with kindness. To live long enough to prove that the cruelest thing you can do to a betrayer isn't destroy them, but let them see you still stand, whole. Unbroken. Moving forward without them. I survived. Be well. 4 words. Heavier than any verdict. And if you're hearing this story, whether you're in a car, alone in your kitchen, or curled up under covers on a lonely night, remember, you are not alone. Someone once lost everything, was abandoned at their weakest, and still rose. They didn't turn to stone. They became people, scarred, but clearer than ever before. You can too.